A racist boss named Alan fires Harold, a loyal black employee in his 60s right before his retirement. But only days later, Alan's rash decision sets off a chain of unexpected events. Can Alan undo the damage, or has he sealed his fate? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. A black, loyal employee on his 60s, Harold Thompson stood by his desk, his weathered hands resting on the smooth surface. He looked around the office, his eyes misty with memories. 40 years. It seemed like only yesterday he'd walked through those doors as a fresh-faced young man, eager to make his mark. Hard to believe it's almost over, he murmured to himself, a bittersweet smile tugging at his lips. As he began to tidy up his workspace, preparing for his upcoming retirement, Harold's gaze fell on the framed photos that adorned his desk. There was one of him and his co-workers from his early days, their youthful faces beaming with hope and excitement. Another showed the company picnic from last summer, where he'd been honored for his years of service. Harold picked up the frame, his heart swelling with emotion. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" he said softly, running his thumb over the smiling faces of his colleagues. Just then, Sarah from accounting poked her head around the corner. "Morning, Harold. How are you doing today?" Harold's face lit up. "Good morning, Sarah. I'm doing just fine, thank you. How about yourself?" Sarah smiled warmly. "Oh, you know, same old. We're all going to miss you so much when you're gone, Harold. It won't be the same without you." Harold felt a lump form in his throat. "That's very kind of you to say, Sarah. I'll miss all of you too. This place, it's been my second home for so long." As Sarah walked away, Harold decided to take a stroll through the office. He wanted to soak in every detail, every memory. The familiar hum of computers, the smell of coffee brewing in the break room, the gentle chatter of his co-workers. It all felt so precious now. He paused by the water cooler, remembering countless conversations shared there over the years. Birthdays celebrated, promotions announced, personal triumphs and losses shared. This spot had seen it all. "Hey, Mr. Thompson," called out young Mike from IT. "Any words of wisdom for us before you go?" Harold chuckled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Just remember, Mike, it's not about the work you do, but the people you do it with. That's what really matters in the end." As Harold continued his walk, he was oblivious to the meeting taking place in the executive suite upstairs. There, the new boss, Alan Green, was outlining his plans for sweeping changes to the company. Changes that would reshape everything Harold had known and loved about his workplace for 4 decades. Alan Green strode into his new office, his polished shoes clicking against the hardwood floor. At 32, he was the youngest executive to ever lead the company. He straightened his tie and gazed out the window, a smirk playing on his lips. This was his moment to shine. "Time to shake things up," he muttered to himself, turning to face the sleek mahogany desk. Alan's eyes gleamed with ambition as he booted up his computer. He had big plans for the company, and he wasn't about to let anyone stand in his way, especially not the old guard who, in his mind, were holding the company back. "Let's see what we're working with here," Alan said, opening the employee files. He scrolled through the list, his brow furrowing deeper with each passing second. When he reached Harold Thompson's file, Alan let out a low whistle. 40 years? That's practically ancient history, he scoffed. He leaned back in his chair, drumming his fingers on the armrest. Harold's salary was substantial, a reflection of his long tenure and dedication. But to Alan, it was just a number that needed to be cut. "We can't afford to keep dead weight around," Alan muttered, making a note on his tablet. "It's time for some changes." He spent the next hour poring over the files, marking names and calculating potential savings. In Alan's mind, every long-serving employee was a liability, a drain on resources that could be better used elsewhere. As he worked, Alan failed to notice the family photos and personal touches that decorated each employee's file. He didn't see the years of service awards or the glowing performance reviews. All he saw were numbers that didn't align with his vision for a leaner, more modern company. When he finally looked up from his work, the sun was setting outside his window. Alan stretched, feeling satisfied with his progress. He had a plan now, a way to make his mark and prove his worth to the board. Tomorrow, he said to himself, we start fresh. Out with the old, in with the new. Harold made his way through the office, his weathered hands clasping a mug of steaming coffee. The familiar scent of paper and ink filled the air as he greeted his colleagues with a warm smile. At 68, Harold's eyes still sparkled with the same enthusiasm he had on his first day 4 decades ago. "Morning, Mara," he called out to a young woman hunched over her computer. "How's that project coming along?" Mara looked up, her face brightening at the sight of Harold. "It's a bit overwhelming, to be honest," she admitted. Harold chuckled softly. "Remember what I always say? Take it one step at a time. Rome wasn't built in a day, you know." As he moved through the office, Harold noticed a hushed tension in the air. Whispers and worried glances followed him, but he paid them little mind. He'd seen the company weather many storms over the years. At the water cooler, he found Tom and Lisa huddled together, their voices low and urgent. "Everything all right?" Harold asked, concern etching his kindly face. Tom glanced around nervously before speaking. "There's talk of layoffs, Harold. The new boss, he's looking to cut costs." Harold's brow furrowed for a moment, but then he smiled reassuringly. "Now, let's not get ahead of ourselves. I've been here through thick and thin. We always come out stronger on the other side." Lisa bit her lip. "But Harold, they say he's targeting long-serving employees. Your salary." Harold held up a hand, his eyes twinkling. "My salary reflects 40 years of dedication, Lisa. I'm sure Mr. Green understands that." As Harold continued his rounds, offering words of encouragement and sharing anecdotes from his years at the company, he remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in Alan's office. His confidence in his position, built on decades of loyal service, shielded him from the harsh reality of Alan's plans. The day wore on, and despite the undercurrent of anxiety, Harold's presence brought a sense of calm to the office. His unwavering belief in the company and its values served as a beacon of hope for his worried colleagues. Alan Green stood at the head of the long mahogany table, his crisp suit and confident posture exuding authority. The board members sat in silence, their eyes fixed on the young executive as he began his presentation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Alan started, his voice clear and decisive, "I've called this meeting to discuss the future of our company. We need to make some tough decisions to stay competitive in today's market." He clicked a button, and a series of graphs appeared on the screen behind him. The lines showed profits declining over the past few years. "As you can see, we're facing some challenges," Alan continued, "but I have a plan to turn things around." He paced slowly, making eye contact with each board member. "We need to streamline our operations. That means cutting costs and bringing in fresh talent." Alan paused, his expression serious. "One area where we can make significant changes is our workforce. We have many long-serving employees who, while dedicated, are frankly overcompensated for their current value to the company." A murmur ran through the room. Alan pressed on, his voice growing more passionate. "Take Harold Thompson, for example. He's been with us for 40 years. His salary is one of our highest, but his skills are outdated. We could hire 2 or 3 young tech-savvy employees for what we pay him." The board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. One of them, an older gentleman named George, spoke up. "Harold's been a loyal employee for decades. He's mentored countless young workers. Are we really considering letting him go?" Alan nodded firmly. "I understand your concern, George, but we need to think about the company's future, not its past. Harold represents an old way of doing things. We need to evolve." He clicked to the next slide, showing potential savings. By letting go of our older, higher-paid employees and bringing in fresh talent, we can cut costs by 30% in the first year alone. The room fell silent as the board members considered Alan's words. They exchanged glances, a mix of reluctance and resignation on their faces. Finally, the board chairman cleared his throat. "It's a bold plan, Alan. Are you sure this is the best course of action?" Alan stood tall, his conviction unwavering. "I am, sir. It's not an easy decision, but it's necessary for our survival and growth." After a long moment, the chairman nodded slowly. "Very well, we'll trust your judgment on this, Alan. Proceed with your plan." As the meeting adjourned, Alan felt a surge of triumph. He had convinced the board to follow his vision, even if it meant making difficult choices. He was one step closer to reshaping the company in his image. And Harold straightened his tie and smoothed down his shirt as he approached Alan's office. A warm smile played on his lips, his eyes twinkling with anticipation. He was sure this meeting was about his upcoming retirement party. After 40 years of dedicated service, Harold was looking forward to a grand send-off. He knocked gently on the door. "Come in," Alan's voice called out, sounding oddly cold. Harold stepped inside, his smile faltering slightly as he noticed Alan's stern expression. The young executive sat behind his desk, his posture rigid and unwelcoming. "Have a seat, Mr. Thompson," Alan said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Harold's heart sank. Something wasn't right. This wasn't the warm, friendly tone he'd expected for discussing his retirement celebration. "Is everything okay, Alan?" Harold asked, lowering himself into the chair. Alan's face remained impassive. "Mr. Thompson, I'm afraid I have some difficult news for you." Harold's smile disappeared completely, replaced by a look of concern. "Due to financial constraints and the need to restructure our company," Alan continued, his voice devoid of emotion, "we've had to make some tough decisions. I'm sorry to inform you that your position is being terminated, effective immediately." The words hit Harold like a physical blow. He felt the air leave his lungs, his mind reeling in disbelief. "Terminated?" Harold repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm set to retire in just a few days." Alan's expression didn't change. "I understand this is unexpected, but it's a necessary step for the company's future. Your severance package will be processed shortly." Harold sat in stunned silence, trying to process what was happening. 40 years of dedication, of early mornings and late nights, of mentoring young employees and weathering company storms, all of it seemed to crumble away in an instant. Despite the shock and hurt, Harold drew upon his years of experience and dignity. He slowly stood up, his legs feeling weak beneath him. "I see," Harold said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. I understand. Thank you for informing me personally." He turned to leave, his hand on the doorknob when Alan spoke again. "Mr. Thompson, I'll need your security badge before you go." Harold paused, then reached into his pocket and placed his badge on Alan's desk without a word. With his head held high, he walked out of the office, leaving behind 4 decades of memories and a young executive who had yet to understand the true value of experience and loyalty. As Harold left the office building for the last time, a heavy silence fell over the workplace. The news of his abrupt termination spread quickly, leaving his colleagues in a state of shock and disbelief. Many of them had known Harold for years, some even decades, and the thought of the office without his warm presence was almost unimaginable. Sarah, a young accountant who had always looked up to Harold, fought back tears as she watched him walk out. "This isn't right," she whispered to her cubicle mate Tom. "How can they do this to him?" Tom shook his head, his face a mixture of anger and resignation. "It's not fair, but what can we do? We're all replaceable in their eyes." Throughout the day, small groups of employees gathered in break rooms and corners, their voices hushed as they discussed what had happened. The atmosphere was tense, filled with a sense of betrayal and fear. If someone like Harold could be let go so callously, what did that mean for the rest of them? Meanwhile, Harold drove home in a daze, his mind still reeling from the morning's events. The familiar streets he had traveled for years now seemed strange and unfamiliar. As he pulled into his driveway, he took a deep breath, trying to compose himself before facing his wife, Martha. Martha was in the kitchen when Harold walked in. One look at his face told her something was terribly wrong. "Harold?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. "What's happened?" Harold's shoulders slumped as he sank into a chair at the kitchen table. "They let me go, Martha," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Just like that. 40 years, and they showed me the door." Martha gasped, rushing to her husband's side. She wrapped her arms around him, feeling him tremble beneath her touch. "Oh, Harold," she murmured, her own heart breaking for him. As the reality of the situation sank in, Harold found himself overwhelmed by a mix of emotions. Anger at the injustice of it all, sadness at the abrupt end to a career he had loved, and a deep sense of loss that left him feeling adrift. "I don't know what to do, Martha," he admitted, his voice cracking. "I've been going to that office every day for so long. What am I supposed to do now?" Martha held him tighter, wishing she had the answers he needed. "We'll figure it out together," she promised, her voice soft but determined. "You're not alone in this, Harold. We'll get through it." Alan Green strode through the office with an air of confidence, his chin held high and a satisfied smile playing on his lips. The decision to let Harold go had been tough, but necessary in his mind. Now, he was ready to move forward with his vision for the company's future. In the days that followed Harold's departure, Alan wasted no time in implementing his plans. He sat at his desk, scrolling through a list of potential new hires on his computer screen. All of them were young, fresh out of college, and brimming with the latest ideas in business and technology. "Perfect," Alan muttered to himself, clicking to approve a batch of interviews. He envisioned a workplace filled with energy and innovation, free from what he saw as the dead weight of older employees stuck in their ways. As he walked through the office, Alan couldn't help but notice the somber atmosphere that still lingered. Employees spoke in hushed tones, their eyes darting away when he passed. But he brushed off their concerns, convinced that they would soon see the benefits of his changes. In the conference room, Alan presented his modernization plans to the department heads. "We're going to streamline our processes," he announced, pointing to a sleek diagram on the screen. "Out with the old, in with the new. I want to see us embracing cutting-edge technology and agile methodologies." Some of the older managers shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but Alan pressed on, his voice filled with enthusiasm. "This is how we'll stay competitive in today's market. We need to be faster, more efficient, and more innovative than ever before." As the days passed, the office began to transform. New faces appeared, young and eager, while more of the longtime employees found themselves pushed out. Alan walked through the rows of desks, nodding approvingly at the sight of fresh graduates hunched over their computers, furiously typing away. This is progress, he thought to himself, feeling a surge of pride. He was certain that he was steering the company in the right direction, even if some couldn't see it yet. The future, in Alan's mind, was bright and full of potential, and he was determined to be the one to lead them there. Harold sat in his favorite armchair, staring out the window at the well-manicured lawn he had tended to for years. The grass needed mowing, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. His hands, once busy with important documents and mentoring young employees, now felt empty and useless. His wife, Martha, watched him with concern from the kitchen doorway. "Harold, dear," she said gently, "why don't you come help me bake some cookies? It might take your mind off things." Harold turned to her with a weak smile. "That's kind of you, Martha, but I'm not in the mood for baking." He tried to focus on his stamp collection, a hobby he had neglected during his busy working years. But as he flipped through the pages of his album, each colorful stamp reminded him of a different country he had hoped to visit after retirement. Now those dreams felt distant and hollow. At the office, Harold's absence was keenly felt. Sarah, a young employee he had mentored, stared at his empty desk with a lump in her throat. The plant he had lovingly cared for was starting to wilt, much like the spirits of those he had left behind. "It's not the same without Mr. Thompson," Sarah whispered to her colleague, Mark. Mark nodded solemnly. "I know. He always knew how to brighten up even the toughest days." Back at home, Harold tried to find purpose in his days. He started a small vegetable garden, hoping the act of nurturing something would fill the void left by his abrupt dismissal. As he dug his hands into the rich soil, he couldn't help but think of the seeds of wisdom he had planted in his co-workers over the years. The sense of injustice gnawed at him constantly. He had given 4 decades of his life to the company, only to be discarded like yesterday's newspaper. The memory of Alan's cold eyes as he delivered the news still sent a chill down Harold's spine. Harold's family did their best to support him. His daughter, Emily, visited more often, bringing her children along to cheer up their grandfather. But even as he played with his grandkids, Harold's mind wandered back to the office, wondering how his former colleagues were faring without him. As the weeks passed, the company began to experience unexpected turbulence. The first signs of trouble appeared when Johnson & Co., a long-standing client, called to cancel their contract. The account manager, puzzled by this sudden decision, asked for an explanation. "We've been doing business with your company for over 2 decades, Mr. Johnson said, his voice tinged with disappointment. Harold Thompson was always our point of contact. He understood our needs and values. Without him, we're not sure we can trust your company's integrity anymore." This wasn't an isolated incident. More clients started withdrawing their contracts, each citing similar reasons. The loss of Harold had created a ripple effect that no one had anticipated. Sarah, who had taken over some of Harold's responsibilities, found herself struggling to maintain relationships with clients who had known Harold for years. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Thompson is no longer with us," she would explain, her heart sinking each time she had to say those words. In the boardroom, Alan Green sat at the head of the table, his brow furrowed as he listened to the latest reports. The numbers were concerning, but he refused to acknowledge the root cause. "These are just temporary setbacks," Alan declared, waving his hand dismissively. "Change always brings some resistance. The clients will come around once they see our new, streamlined approach." But the problems persisted. The office atmosphere grew tense as employees whispered about declining profits and potential layoffs. The young talent Alan had brought in struggled to fill the shoes of experienced workers like Harold, making mistakes that cost the company both time and money. Despite the mounting evidence, Alan clung to his belief that his decision had been the right one. He doubled down on his modernization efforts, convinced that pushing forward was the only way to overcome these obstacles. "We're in a transition phase," he told his worried staff. "These issues will pass. We just need to stay the course." As the weeks turned into months, the company's financial situation grew increasingly dire. More clients continued to pull out, citing the loss of trust and personal relationships that Harold had cultivated over the years. The company's revenue began to plummet at an alarming rate. In the boardroom, Alan sat at the head of the table, his confident demeanor starting to crack under the pressure. The board members, once supportive of his vision, now looked at him with skepticism and concern. "Mr. Green," one of the board members began, her voice stern, "we've lost nearly 30% of our revenue in the past quarter alone. This trend is unsustainable. We need to address the elephant in the room. Was letting go of Harold Thompson the right decision?" Alan felt a bead of sweat form on his brow, but he maintained his composure. "I understand your concerns," he said, trying to sound assured. "But we're in a transition phase. These setbacks are temporary. Our new strategies will soon bear fruit." Another board member shook his head. "Alan, we've been hearing this for months now. The numbers don't lie. We're losing clients faster than we can replace them. Many have specifically mentioned Harold's departure as their reason for leaving." Alan's mind raced. He hadn't anticipated this level of backlash from Harold's termination. He had been so certain that cutting costs and bringing in fresh talent was the key to success. Now, faced with the harsh reality of declining revenues and unhappy clients, doubt began to creep into his thoughts. I can turn this around," Alan insisted, his voice less confident than before. "We just need more time for our new initiatives to take effect. The modernization process." "The modernization process has cost us dearly," interrupted another board member. "We've lost decades of experience and client relationships. Maybe it's time we reconsider our approach." As the meeting continued, Alan felt the pressure mounting. The board's questions became more pointed, their criticism more direct. For the first time since taking over, Alan began to question his decisions. The cracks in his plan were no longer just visible. They were threatening to bring down everything he had worked for. Harold sat in his living room, sipping coffee from his favorite mug, a gift from his colleagues on his 30th work anniversary. The phone rang, breaking the quiet morning routine. He answered, recognizing the voice of his former coworker, Sarah. "Harold, how are you doing?" Sarah asked, her voice tinged with concern. "Oh, keeping busy," Harold replied, trying to sound cheerful. "How are things at the office?" Sarah sighed heavily. "Not good, Harold, not good at all. We've lost 3 more major clients this week." Harold felt a pang in his chest. Despite his abrupt dismissal, he still cared deeply for the company and his former colleagues. "I'm sorry to hear that, Sarah. What's going on?" "It's Alan," Sarah explained. "He's running the company into the ground. He doesn't understand the relationships we've built over the years. Clients are leaving left and right saying, 'It's not the same without you.'" Harold listened intently, a mix of emotions washing over him. He felt a twinge of satisfaction knowing his work had meant so much, but it was overshadowed by genuine concern for his friends and the company he had dedicated his life to. "How are you all holding up?" Harold asked, his voice soft with empathy. "We're struggling, Harold. Morale is at an all-time low. Alan keeps pushing for these new strategies, but nothing's working. We miss your guidance, your steady hand." As Sarah continued to share the company's troubles, Harold felt a lump form in his throat. He was touched by the loyalty of his former colleagues and saddened by the company's decline. Part of him felt vindicated. His years of experience and client relationships had clearly been valuable, but he took no joy in the company's struggles. "I wish there was something I could do," Harold said, his voice heavy with emotion. "We all wish you were still here," Sarah replied. "Things were different under your leadership. You cared about people, not just profits." As the conversation wound down, Harold thanked Sarah for keeping him informed. After hanging up, he sat back in his chair, lost in thought. The company's troubles weighed heavily on his mind, stirring a complex mix of emotions: concern, sadness, and a bittersweet sense of vindication. As the company's financial situation continued to deteriorate, Alan Green found himself in an increasingly precarious position. The once confident executive now paced nervously in his office, his brow furrowed with worry. The latest financial reports lay scattered across his desk, each page telling a story of declining profits and lost clients. A sharp knock on the door interrupted his anxious thoughts. "Come in," Alan called out, trying to keep his voice steady. Clara, his assistant, stepped inside. "Mr. Green, the board members are here for the emergency meeting." Alan's stomach tightened. He nodded, straightening his tie as he prepared to face the music. "Thank you, Martha. I'll be right there." As he walked into the boardroom, the tension was palpable. The board members sat around the large oak table, their faces etched with concern and disappointment. Alan took his seat at the head of the table, feeling the weight of their stares. "Mr. Green," began Mr. Johnson, the head of the board, "we've called this meeting to discuss the company's alarming financial situation. Can you explain how we've lost so many key clients in such a short time?" Alan cleared his throat, his confidence wavering. "We've been implementing new strategies to modernize our approach." "Strategies that are clearly not working," interrupted another board member. "Our most loyal clients are jumping ship. What happened to the relationships we've built over decades?" As the questions continued, Alan felt a cold sweat forming on his brow. He realized with a sinking feeling that he had gravely underestimated the importance of the company's long-standing employees, especially Harold Thompson. The older man's network of client relationships and deep understanding of the business had been the glue holding everything together. "Perhaps we acted too hastily in letting go of our experienced staff," one board member suggested, eyeing Alan critically. The words hit Alan like a punch to the gut. He had been so focused on cutting costs and bringing in fresh talent that he had overlooked the value of experience and long-term relationships. Now, as he faced the disappointed faces of the board, Alan began to panic internally, desperately searching for a solution to the mess he had created. As Alan left the boardroom, his mind reeled from the harsh criticism he had just endured. He walked through the office, noticing for the first time the somber atmosphere that had settled over the workplace. The once bustling corridors were eerily quiet, with employees speaking in hushed tones and avoiding eye contact. Passing by the break room, Alan overheard a conversation that made him stop in his tracks. "I can't take it anymore," a young woman's voice said, filled with frustration. Ever since Harold left, this place has become unbearable." "I know what you mean," another voice chimed in. "I've already started looking for other jobs. Without Harold's guidance, I feel lost here." Alan's heart sank as he recognized the voices. They belonged to Sarah and Mike, two promising young employees whom Harold had taken under his wing. He had always admired their potential and had counted on them to be future leaders in the company. Leaning against the wall, Alan listened as the conversation continued. "Remember how Harold used to help us navigate difficult projects?" Sarah asked, her voice tinged with nostalgia. "He always knew how to break things down and make them manageable." Mike sighed heavily. "Yeah, and he had a way of making everyone feel valued. Now it's like we're just numbers on a spreadsheet." The weight of their words hit Alan hard. He had been so focused on cutting costs and implementing new strategies that he had completely overlooked the human element of the business. Harold's mentorship had been the glue holding the younger employees together, providing them with guidance and support that Alan had failed to recognize. As he listened to Sarah and Mike discuss their plans to leave, Alan felt a wave of regret wash over him. He realized that by pushing Harold out, he hadn't just lost a valuable employee. He had dismantled an entire support system within the company. The toxic environment he had inadvertently created was now driving away the very talent he had hoped to nurture. Alan slumped against the wall, the full extent of his misjudgment finally sinking in. He had underestimated Harold's importance not just in maintaining client relationships, but in shaping the company's future through mentorship. The damage caused by Harold's absence ran deeper than he could have ever imagined, and Alan was left grappling with the realization that his actions had put the entire company at risk. Alan paced in his office, his hands shaking as he dialed Harold's number. The phone rang several times before a familiar voice answered. "Hello?" Harold said, his tone cautious. "Harold, it's Alan Green," he said, trying to sound confident. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "What can I do for you, Mr. Green?" Harold asked, his voice cool and formal. Alan cleared his throat. "Listen, Harold, I'll cut to the chase. The company's in trouble and we need you back. I'm prepared to offer you your old position, effective immediately." Harold remained silent for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was measured. "I see. And what exactly has changed since you decided to let me go?" Alan felt a flicker of irritation. "Look, that's water under the bridge now. We're facing some challenges, and your experience could be valuable. I'm giving you a chance to come back and help turn things around." "A chance?" Harold repeated, his tone sharpening. "Mr. Green, I dedicated 40 years of my life to this company. I built relationships with clients, mentored young employees, and helped shape the company's culture. And you discarded all of that without a second thought." Alan's frustration grew. "That's ancient history now, Harold. We need to focus on the present. Are you interested in the job or not?" Harold let out a heavy sigh. "Mr. Green, I don't think you understand. You're not offering me an opportunity. You're asking for a favor, and you're doing so without acknowledging the harm you've caused, to me, to the employees, and to the company itself." Alan's grip tightened on the phone. "What do you want from me, Harold? An apology? Fine, I'm sorry. Now, can we move past this and focus on saving the company?" "I'm afraid not," Harold replied firmly. "Your apology isn't sincere, and it's clear you're only interested in saving yourself. You haven't learned anything from this experience, have you?" Alan's temper flared. "Now wait just a minute." "No, Mr. Green," Harold interrupted. "I won't be returning to work for someone who doesn't value his employees or understand the importance of integrity in business. I suggest you take a hard look at your leadership style and the damage it's caused. Good day." The line went dead, leaving Alan staring at the phone in disbelief. As the days passed, Alan's world began to crumble around him. The company's losses continued to mount, and each morning brought new reports of declining profits and departing clients. He sat at his desk, his head in his hands, feeling the weight of his mistakes pressing down on him. The phone rang and Alan answered it with a sense of dread. It was the board chairman. "Greena, we need to talk," the chairman's voice was stern. "If you don't turn this ship around soon, we'll have no choice but to replace you. You have 1 week to show us significant improvement." The line went dead, leaving Alan in stunned silence. He looked around his office, once a symbol of his ambition and success, now feeling more like a prison. For the first time since taking over, Alan felt truly afraid. He thought about Harold, about the years of experience and wisdom he had cast aside so carelessly. Alan realized now how short-sighted he had been, how his arrogance had blinded him to the true value of people like Harold. With a heavy sigh, Alan picked up the phone again. He dialed Harold's number, his heart pounding in his chest. This time, when Harold answered, Alan's voice was different, softer, humbler. "Harold," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "It's Alan again. I need to apologize. Really apologize this time." There was a pause on the other end. "I'm listening," Harold said cautiously. Alan took a deep breath. "I was wrong, Harold. Not just about firing you, but about everything. I thought I knew better than everyone else, that I could run this company on numbers alone. But I was so wrong." He continued, his voice thick with emotion. "I didn't value the relationships you built, the knowledge you had, or the impact you made on everyone here. I was arrogant and short-sighted, and I've hurt a lot of people because of it." Alan's voice trembled as he spoke. "I'm not calling to ask you for anything. I needed you to know how sorry I am. For everything." The next day, Alan found himself sitting across from Harold in a small coffee shop downtown. The bustling noise of the cafe seemed to fade away as the two men faced each other, the air thick with tension. Harold's face was a mask of calm, but his eyes betrayed a mix of pain and anger. Alan, usually so confident, felt small under Harold's steady gaze. "Thank you for meeting me, Harold," Alan began, his voice uncharacteristically shaky. Harold nodded but remained silent, waiting for Alan to continue. Alan cleared his throat. I wanted to apologize in person for what happened." He paused, struggling to find the right words. "I made a terrible mistake." Harold's eyebrows raised slightly. "A mistake?" he repeated, his voice even, but with a hint of bitterness. Alan flinched at Harold's tone. He realized that a simple apology wasn't enough. He needed to do more, to truly acknowledge the harm he had caused. "No, not just a mistake," Alan admitted, his voice growing stronger. "I was wrong. Completely wrong. I let my arrogance and my desire for quick results blind me to the real value of experience and relationships." Harold's expression softened slightly, but he remained silent. Alan continued, his words coming faster now. "I didn't appreciate what you brought to the company. The trust you built with clients, the way you mentored younger employees. I thought I could replace all that with new faces and modern methods, but I was so wrong." He looked Harold in the eye, his own filling with tears. "The company is falling apart without you, Harold. But it's not just about the business. I've hurt people, good people like you, and I don't know how to make it right." Harold leaned back in his chair, studying Alan's face. "What exactly are you asking for, Alan?" Alan took a deep breath. I'm pleading with you to come back. Not as an employee, but as a consultant. We need your expertise, your relationships, but more than that, we need your guidance. I need your guidance." Harold sat quietly for a moment, considering Alan's plea. The older man's eyes, once filled with hurt, now held a thoughtful gleam. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "Alan," Harold began, his voice calm but firm, "I appreciate your apology, but if I were to come back, it wouldn't be for the money or to save the company's bottom line." Alan nodded eagerly, hope flickering in his eyes. "Of course, I appreciate your apology, but if I were to come back, it wouldn't be for the money or to save the company's bottom line." "See, Harold, what would it take?" Harold's gaze intensified. "My concern is for the younger employees. They need guidance, mentorship. They need to know they're valued beyond just the numbers they produce." Alan swallowed hard, realizing the depth of his missteps. "I understand. What do you propose?" "I'll return as a consultant," Harold said, "but on one condition. We need an internal agreement, in writing, that all employees will be treated with respect and without discrimination. Age, gender, background. None of that should matter. What matters is the person and their contribution. Alan hesitated, his business-oriented mind struggling with the implications. But as he looked at Harold's unwavering expression, he knew he had no choice. "All right," Alan agreed, his voice barely above a whisper. "We'll draft the agreement immediately." Harold nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Good. And Alan, this isn't just about putting words on paper. It's about changing the culture. Are you prepared for that?" Alan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the challenge ahead. "I am," he said, his voice growing stronger. "I know it won't be easy, but I'm ready to learn and make real changes." Harold extended his hand across the table. "Then we have a deal. Let's get to work on making this company a place where everyone can thrive." As they shook hands, both men felt a shift in the air. It was more than just a business agreement. It was the beginning of a new chapter for the company and for themselves. Harold's return to the company was met with a wave of relief and joy from his former colleagues. As he walked through the office doors, a spontaneous round of applause erupted. Smiles broke out on faces that had been strained for weeks, and the air seemed to lighten instantly. "Welcome back, Mr. Thompson," called out Sarah, a young marketing assistant, her eyes brimming with tears of happiness. Harold smiled warmly, touched by the reception. "It's good to be back," he said, his voice filled with emotion. As he made his way to his new desk, Harold was stopped repeatedly by employees wanting to shake his hand or give him a quick hug. The atmosphere was celebratory, but beneath the surface, a current of tension still ran through the office. Many employees cast wary glances towards Alan's office. They wondered if the young executive would truly follow through on his promises, or if this was just a temporary fix to save the company. Harold sensed their unease and knew he had his work cut out for him. He settled into his new role as a consultant with determination, focusing first on the younger employees who needed guidance the most. In the break room, Harold found a group of junior staff members huddled together, speaking in hushed tones. As he approached, they fell silent, looking up at him with a mix of hope and uncertainty. "Mind if I join you?" Harold asked gently. They nodded, making room for him at the table. Harold sat down and leaned in, his kind eyes meeting each of theirs. "I know the past few weeks have been tough," he began, "but I'm here to listen and to help. What's on your minds?" Slowly, the young employees began to open up. They shared their fears about job security, their frustrations with the recent changes, and their hopes for the future. Harold listened intently, offering words of encouragement and practical advice. As the days passed, Harold's presence began to have a noticeable effect on the office morale. He organized mentoring sessions, pairing experienced staff with newer employees. He encouraged open communication and worked tirelessly to bridge the gap between management and staff. As the days turned into weeks, Alan began to implement the changes Harold had suggested. At first, it was a struggle for the young executive to swallow his pride and admit he needed guidance. But with each passing day, he saw the positive impact of Harold's wisdom. Alan called a company-wide meeting to announce the new policies on respect and inclusivity. Standing at the front of the conference room, he looked out at the sea of faces, some skeptical, others hopeful. "I know I've made mistakes," Alan began, his voice wavering slightly, "but I'm committed to doing better. Starting today, we're implementing new policies to ensure every employee feels valued and respected." As he outlined the changes, Alan noticed Harold nodding approvingly from the back of the room. It gave him the confidence to continue. The new policies included regular check-ins with employees, a mentorship program for new hires, and a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. Alan also announced the formation of an employee committee to provide feedback directly to management. Slowly but surely, the company began to recover. Clients who had left started to return, reassured by Harold's presence and the positive changes they saw in the workplace. One by one, contracts were renewed, and new business began to trickle in. In the break room one afternoon, Alan overheard a conversation between two employees. "It's like night and day around here," one said. "I actually look forward to coming to work now." The other nodded in agreement. Yeah, and did you see how Alan actually asked for my opinion in the meeting yesterday? I never thought I'd see the day. Alan felt a mix of shame and pride wash over him. He realized how much he had changed in such a short time. Later that day, Alan sought out Harold in his office. He found the older man poring over some reports, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. "Harold," Alan said softly, "I wanted to thank you." Harold looked up, a gentle smile on his face. "What for, Alan?" "For teaching me the true value of humility and respect," Alan replied, his voice thick with emotion. "I thought I knew everything about running a business, but you've shown me that it's about more than just numbers, it's about people." Harold nodded, his eyes twinkling. "That's a lesson worth learning, son, and you're never too old or too young to learn it." As the weeks passed, Harold and Alan settled into a new rhythm at the company. Harold's role as a consultant became more than just a title. He was truly the moral compass of the organization. His gentle guidance and wealth of experience proved invaluable in navigating the complex world of business ethics. Alan, for his part, was making a genuine effort to change. Though he still struggled with his ego at times, he found himself increasingly appreciating Harold's wisdom. There were moments when his old instincts would flare up, urging him to make quick, profit-driven decisions. But now, he would pause and consider. What would Harold say about this? One afternoon, as they sat in Alan's office reviewing quarterly reports, Alan looked up at Harold with a mix of admiration and curiosity. "Harold," he began, "how do you always seem to know the right thing to do?" Harold chuckled softly. "It's not about always knowing, Alan. It's about always trying to do what's right, even when it's hard." Alan nodded, letting the words sink in. He was learning that leadership wasn't just about making bold moves and quick profits. It was about building trust, fostering relationships, and creating a workplace where people felt valued. As the company stabilized, the change was palpable. Employees walked the halls with renewed energy, productivity increased, and client relationships strengthened. The board of directors, once skeptical of Alan's leadership, now expressed their approval of the new direction. At the next board meeting, the chairwoman, Mrs. Thompson, addressed Alan and Harold directly. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice warm with approval, "I must say the turnaround we've seen is remarkable. Alan, your willingness to learn and adapt is commendable. And Harold, your guidance has been invaluable. Together, you've steered this company back on course." Alan felt a surge of pride, not just for himself, but for what they had accomplished together. He glanced at Harold, who gave him a subtle nod of encouragement. "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson," Alan replied. "But the credit really goes to Harold. He's taught me that a company's greatest asset is its people." Harold smiled, touched by Alan's words. He could see the genuine change in the young executive, and it filled him with hope for the future of the company he had served for so long. As the weeks turned into months, Harold's influence within the company grew steadily. His gentle guidance and wealth of experience became the cornerstone of a renewed corporate culture. The office atmosphere transformed from one of tension and uncertainty to one of collaboration and mutual respect. Young employees, once wary of approaching senior management, now sought out Harold's advice eagerly. His office door was always open, and the sound of his warm chuckle often drifted down the hallways. Harold took great joy in sharing his knowledge, watching as the younger generation blossomed under his tutelage. One day, Sarah, a bright marketing associate, approached Harold with a bold idea for a new product line. In the past, such suggestions might have been dismissed, but Harold listened intently, his eyes twinkling with interest. "You know, Sarah," he said, leaning back in his chair, "that's a fantastic idea. Why don't we present this to Alan together?" Sarah's face lit up with excitement. "Really? You think it's good enough?" Harold nodded, smiling. "I do. And more importantly, I think you're ready to take the lead on this project." As innovative ideas like Sarah's began to take root, the company started to regain its former glory. Clients who had once left returned, drawn by the positive changes and renewed energy. The office buzzed with creativity and purpose. For Harold, watching this transformation brought a deep sense of fulfillment. Though the pain of his earlier dismissal still lingered, it was gradually being replaced by pride in what he had helped to build. He found himself looking forward to each day, eager to see what new developments would unfold. One afternoon, as Harold watched a group of young employees excitedly discussing a new project, he felt a gentle tap on his shoulder. It was Alan, his face wearing an expression of genuine gratitude. "Harold," Alan said softly, "I just wanted to thank you. What you've done here, it's more than I could have ever imagined." Harold nodded, a warm smile spreading across his face. "It's not just me, Alan. It's all of us, working together. That's the real magic." One afternoon, Alan stood at the front of the packed conference room, his hands trembling slightly as he gripped the podium. The entire company had gathered for this meeting, and the air was thick with anticipation. Harold sat in the front row, his wise eyes fixed on the young executive. Taking a deep breath, Alan began to speak. "I've called you all here today for an important reason," he said, his voice wavering slightly. "I owe all of you, especially Harold, an apology." A hushed murmur rippled through the crowd. Alan continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. "When I first came to this company, I made a terrible mistake. I thought I knew better than everyone else. I disregarded the years of experience and dedication that many of you brought to this company, especially Harold." Alan's eyes met Harold's, and he saw a flicker of surprise in the older man's gaze. "Harold, I treated you unfairly. I let my arrogance blind me to your true value, and I hurt not just you, but this entire company in the process. I'm deeply sorry for the pain I caused you and for the disrespect I showed to everyone here." The room was silent now, all eyes on Alan as he continued his heartfelt apology. "I've learned so much since then, thanks to Harold's graciousness in returning and guiding us all. I now understand that true leadership isn't about making quick changes or cutting costs. It's about respecting each other, valuing experience, and working together." Tears welled up in Alan's eyes as he spoke. "I want to publicly acknowledge the harm I caused and ask for your forgiveness. I promise to do better, to listen more, and to lead with humility and respect." As Alan finished speaking, Harold slowly stood up. For a moment, the two men looked at each other, years of tension and growth passing between them. Then, to everyone's surprise, Harold walked up to the podium and embraced Alan. The room erupted in applause. Employees stood up cheering and clapping, many with tears in their eyes. The atmosphere was electric with emotion as people began to gather around Harold, patting him on the back and shaking his hand. As the applause died down and the employees returned to their seats, Harold felt a weight lift from his shoulders. For the first time since his abrupt dismissal, he truly felt at peace with the situation. The sincere apology from Alan had touched him deeply, and he could see the genuine change in the young executive's demeanor. Over the next few weeks, Harold threw himself into his role as mentor with renewed enthusiasm. He walked through the office, stopping to chat with the younger employees, offering advice, and sharing stories from his decades of experience. His eyes twinkled with joy as he watched them grow and develop their skills. One afternoon, Harold sat with Sarah, a promising young accounting associate. "You know, Sarah," he said warmly, "I see a lot of potential in you. Don't be afraid to speak up in meetings. Your ideas are valuable." Sarah smiled gratefully. "Thanks, Mr. Thompson. I'm so glad you're here to guide us. We all feel so much more secure knowing you're looking out for us." Harold patted her hand gently. "That's what I'm here for, dear. To make sure you all get the respect and opportunities you deserve." As the days passed, Harold could see the positive impact of his mentorship. The younger employees were more confident, more innovative, and more collaborative. They carried themselves with a new sense of pride and purpose, knowing they were valued members of the team. Alan, true to his word, continued to implement policies that fostered respect and inclusivity. He often sought Harold's advice, and together they created a work environment that balanced experience with fresh ideas. One evening, as Harold prepared to leave the office, he paused to look around. The bustling energy, the smiling faces, the sense of camaraderie, it all filled him with a deep sense of satisfaction. He knew that his legacy in the company was secure. The values he had always championed were now woven into the very fabric of the organization. With a contented sigh, Harold realized it was time to start thinking about his final retirement. He had accomplished what he set out to do, ensure the next generation was well prepared and treated with respect. As he switched off his desk lamp, Harold felt a sense of fulfillment wash over him. He was ready for the next chapter of his life, knowing he had made a lasting difference. As the weeks turned into months, Alan found himself profoundly changed by Harold's influence. The young executive, once driven solely by ambition and profit margins, now understood the true value of humility and respect in leadership. One morning, Alan sat in his office, reflecting on the journey that had brought him to this point. He pulled out a small notebook and began to write, "Personal commitment, to uphold the principles Harold has taught me, to lead with respect, value experience, and never forget the human element in business." He closed the notebook with a sense of purpose. This wasn't just a fleeting promise, it was a fundamental shift in his approach to leadership. Later that day, Alan and Harold met for their weekly strategy session. As they discussed upcoming projects, Alan noticed how seamlessly they worked together now. Gone was the tension and mistrust that had once defined their relationship. "Harold," Alan said, his voice filled with sincerity, "I want you to know how much I value your partnership. Your wisdom has been invaluable to me and to this company." Harold smiled warmly. "I appreciate that, Alan. And I must say, I've been impressed by your willingness to learn and grow. You've come a long way." Their conversation flowed easily, touching on business matters but also delving into personal insights and shared experiences. It was clear that their working relationship had evolved into something more, a genuine partnership built on mutual respect and a shared vision for the company's future. As they wrapped up their meeting, Alan proposed an idea. "Harold, I think we should formalize our mentorship program. Your guidance has been so beneficial to our younger employees. I'd like to see that continue long after you retire." Harold nodded approvingly. "That's an excellent idea, Alan. It would ensure that the values we've worked to instill here continue to shape the company's culture." Together, they began sketching out plans for the program, their excitement palpable as they discussed the potential impact on future generations of employees. As they worked, it was clear that Alan and Harold had found a balance that brought out the best in both of them. Alan's drive and innovative thinking complemented Harold's experience and wisdom. Their partnership had become the cornerstone of the company's renewed success and positive culture. Months later, the company buzzed with excitement as employees from every department gathered in the grand conference room. Colorful balloons and streamers adorned the walls, and a large banner read, "Thank you, Harold," in bold letters. The air was filled with a mix of joy and nostalgia as everyone prepared to bid farewell to the man who had become the heart and soul of their workplace. Harold entered the room, his eyes widening in surprise at the sight before him. A thunderous applause erupted, and he felt a lump form in his throat. Alan stood at the front of the room, a warm smile on his face as he gestured for Harold to join him. "Ladies and gentlemen," Alan began, his voice filled with genuine respect, "we're here today to celebrate an extraordinary man. Harold Thompson has not only served this company for over 4 decades, but has also shaped its very spirit." As Alan spoke, Harold's gaze swept across the room, taking in the faces of his colleagues, both old and young. He saw misty eyes and wide smiles, a testament to the impact he had made. One by one, employees stepped forward to share their stories. Sarah from accounting spoke of how Harold's advice had given her the confidence to pursue a promotion. Mark from IT recalled how Harold's patience had helped him through a difficult project. "Harold taught me that true leadership isn't about authority, but about inspiring others," Mark said, his voice thick with emotion. As the speeches continued, Harold felt overwhelmed by the outpouring of love and gratitude. He listened intently to each person, his heart swelling with pride and affection for the team he had come to consider family. When it was Harold's turn to speak, he stood slowly, taking a moment to compose himself. "I never expected this," he began, his voice wavering slightly. "When I started here all those years ago, I was just a young man looking to make a living. But what I found was so much more than a job. I found a purpose, a family." He paused, looking at the faces before him. Each one of you has taught me something valuable. You've challenged me, inspired me, and made me a better person. And for that, I am eternally grateful. As Harold stood before his colleagues, his eyes misted over with emotion. He looked out at the sea of faces, each one holding a special place in his heart. The weight of his career, spanning over 4 decades, settled on his shoulders like a warm, comforting blanket. He thought back to his first day at the company, a young man full of ambition and uncertainty. Now, as he prepared to leave, he realized how much he had grown alongside the business. The challenges he had faced, from adapting to new technologies to navigating office politics, had shaped him into the man he was today. Harold's gaze fell on the younger employees, many of whom he had personally mentored. He felt a surge of pride as he remembered their progress, from nervous newcomers to confident professionals. He knew that in them the values he held dear, integrity, respect, and dedication, would live on. As I look around this room, Harold continued, his voice steady despite the emotions swirling within him, I see not just colleagues, but friends. I see the future of this company. And I couldn't be more proud or more confident in where we're headed. He paused, taking a deep breath. There were times when I thought my journey here was over. But those challenges only made us stronger. They taught us the importance of unity, of treating each person with dignity and respect. Harold's eyes met Alan's and he nodded slightly, acknowledging the growth they had both experienced. Together, we've built something special here. It's not just about profits or success. It's about creating a place where people can grow, where they can make a difference. As he spoke, Harold felt a deep sense of fulfillment wash over him. The legacy he was leaving behind wasn't just in the company's success, but in the lives he had touched and the values he had instilled. He knew that long after he was gone, these principles would continue to guide the company forward. To all of you, Harold said, his voice filled with warmth, thank you for being part of this journey. I may be retiring, but a part of me will always be here cheering you on. The future is bright, and it's in your capable hands. In the weeks following Harold's acknowledgement party, Alan found himself reflecting deeply on the lessons he had learned. The young executive, once driven solely by ambition and profit margins, now understood the true value of respect and inclusivity in the workplace. Inspired by Harold's example, Alan began to implement further changes to ensure the company remained a positive and nurturing environment. He started by revising the company's mission statement, placing a strong emphasis on employee well-being and ethical business practices. Alan also initiated a mentorship program, taking a page from Harold's book. He began working closely with younger executives, sharing the wisdom he had gained through his experiences. In these sessions, Alan would often recount the story of his conflict with Harold, using it as a powerful lesson in humility and the importance of valuing every employee. Remember, Alan would say to his mentees, our success isn't just measured in numbers. It's about the people we work with and the positive impact we can have on their lives. As part of his new approach, Alan instituted regular town hall meetings where employees at all levels could voice their concerns and ideas. He made a point of listening actively and following up on suggestions, showing that every voice mattered. The change in Alan was noticeable to everyone in the company. Where he once walked through the office with an air of detachment, he now greeted employees by name, stopping to chat and showing genuine interest in their work and lives. One day, as Alan was leaving a particularly productive mentoring session, he overheard 2 employees talking in the break room. "Yep, you know, I never thought I'd say this," one of them said, "but Alan's really turned things around. It's like working for a whole new company." The other nodded in agreement. "Yeah, it's amazing. I actually look forward to coming to work now." Alan smiled to himself, feeling a warmth of satisfaction that no profit report had ever given him. He realized that this was the true legacy Harold had left behind, not just a successful company, but a place where people could grow, thrive, and make a real difference. As Harold's final days at the company approached, a bittersweet atmosphere settled over the office. The man who had been a pillar of strength and wisdom for so many years was preparing to say his final goodbyes. Harold spent his mornings tidying up his desk, sorting through decades of memories. He found old photos, handwritten notes from colleagues long gone, and even a few dusty awards he'd forgotten about. Each item brought a smile to his face and a warmth to his heart. In the afternoons, Harold made his rounds through the office. He stopped at each desk, sharing a kind word or a bit of advice with everyone he'd worked alongside. Young employees sought his guidance one last time, while his longtime colleagues reminisced about the good old days. "You know, Harold," said Linda from accounting, her eyes misty, "it won't be the same without you here, but I'm so glad you got to leave on your own terms this time." Harold nodded, patting her hand gently. "Thank you, Linda. It means the world to me to see how far we've all come." As he walked through the halls, Harold noticed the positive changes that had taken root since his return. The office buzzed with energy and collaboration. People from different departments chatted easily, sharing ideas and support. It filled him with pride to see the company thriving. On his last day, Alan organized a company-wide gathering. As Harold entered the room, he was met with a standing ovation. Tears welled up in his eyes as he looked at the faces of those he'd mentored and worked alongside for so many years. Alan stepped forward, his voice thick with emotion. "Harold, you've taught us all so much. Your wisdom and kindness have shaped this company in ways we'll never forget. We're sad to see you go, but we're excited to carry on your legacy." Harold smiled, feeling a mix of sadness and joy. He knew he was leaving the company in good hands. The future looked bright, filled with the promise of continued growth and mutual respect. On Harold's last day, the entire company gathered in the large conference room. Employees from every department squeezed in, some even standing in the hallway, craning their necks to catch a glimpse of the man who had touched so many lives. Alan stood at the front of the room, his usual confident demeanor softened by the emotion of the moment. As Harold entered, a thunderous applause erupted, filling the room with warmth and appreciation. Harold's eyes glistened with unshed tears as he made his way to the front, nodding and smiling at familiar faces. When the applause died down, Alan cleared his throat and began to speak. His voice, usually so controlled, wavered slightly as he addressed the crowd. "Today we say goodbye to more than just a colleague," Alan began. "We say goodbye to a mentor, a friend, and a true pillar of this company. Harold, your wisdom and kindness have shaped not just our business, but each one of us as individuals." Alan paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "I stand here today, humbled by the lessons you've taught us all. Your integrity, your compassion, and your unwavering commitment to treating every person with respect. These are the values that will continue to guide this company long after you've left." As Alan spoke, many in the audience nodded in agreement, some wiping away tears. Harold stood quietly, his hands clasped in front of him, listening intently. "Harold," Alan continued, his voice growing stronger, "I want to make a promise to you, in front of everyone here today. We will uphold the values you've instilled in us. We will continue to treat each other with kindness and respect. We will remember that our greatest asset is not our bottom line, but the people who work tirelessly to achieve it." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Alan turned to face Harold directly, his eyes shining with sincerity. "Thank you, Harold, for everything you've done, for everything you've taught us, and for the legacy you leave behind. We are better because of you." As Alan finished, the room erupted in applause once more. Harold, deeply moved by Alan's words, stepped forward. He looked out at the sea of faces, some he'd known for decades, others for just a short time, and felt a swell of emotion. "Thank you all," Harold said, his voice thick with feeling. "It has been the greatest honor of my life to work alongside each and every one of you. Remember to always treat each other with kindness and respect. The rest will follow." With those final words of wisdom, Harold began to make his way through the crowd. Colleagues reached out to shake his hand, pat his back, and offer words of gratitude. Slowly, he made his way towards the exit, stopping to share a moment with each person who approached him. As Harold stepped out of the office building for the last time, he paused to take in the familiar sights and sounds. The bustling street, the towering buildings, and the distant hum of the city. All of it felt different now, tinged with a sense of finality and accomplishment. He made his way home, where his wife, Sarah, greeted him with a warm embrace and a knowing smile. "How does it feel?" she asked, her eyes twinkling. Harold took a moment to consider. "It feel right," he replied, a peaceful smile spreading across his face. In the days that followed, Harold settled into his retirement with a sense of contentment he hadn't expected. He spent mornings tending to his garden, afternoons reading books he'd long meant to get to, and evenings surrounded by family and friends. One evening, as he sat on his porch watching the sunset, Harold reflected on his journey. He thought about the challenges he'd faced, the friendships he'd forged, and the lessons he'd learned along the way. The memory of his unjust dismissal still stung, but it no longer held the power it once did. Instead, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing that he had turned that painful experience into an opportunity for positive change. Harold's phone buzzed with a message from Alan. It was a photo of the office, showing a newly installed plaque that read, "The Harold Thompson Conference Room, where respect and integrity meet." Harold chuckled softly, touched by the gesture. As he looked out at the golden sky, Harold felt a profound sense of peace. He had left his mark on the company, not just in name, but in the values he had instilled. The principles of respect, kindness, and integrity that he had championed would continue to guide the next generation of employees. Harold's retirement was filled with simple joys, family dinners, visits from former colleagues, and quiet moments of reflection. He found himself truly relaxing for the first time in years, free from the pressures of work but secure in the knowledge that his legacy lived on. Would you forgive a boss like Alan Green who treated you unfairly, as he did to Harold? Yes or no? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear your perspective. And if you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to my channel. I am spending hours upon hours writing these heartwarming stories for you, and your support is what keeps me going.